Live on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Real people, real stories. It's Ron Corbett, Unscripted.
Good evening. Welcome to Unscripted. Monday evening, sun back out in the Byward Market after a fast, quick storm moving through here about an hour ago. Funnel clouds. There's been reports of funnel clouds over, whereabouts is this over? Old Gloucester, soccer pitches in Gloucester. I'm told there's been some reports of funnel clouds out in the East End. That's been happening. What else has been happening today? Gas back over $1.30. Regular unleaded, or at least most of the stations I saw today, all back over $1.30. What else has been happening today? Oh, right. Mo Hayter had his fence taken down. Mo's dangerous fence out in Gloucester. Virtually a lockdown out on Glendenning Crescent today as Mo Hayter had his fence taken down by City of Ottawa Bylaw. That happened today in Ottawa. As a matter of fact, Mo's dangerous fence being investigated right now. We actually have Mo Hayter on the line. Why don't we bring Mo on? Talk a little bit about this story, what happened with this story today in Ottawa. Mo, how are you doing?
Still standing.
Still standing. I can't believe I set you up that easily. There you go, unlike your fence. Mo, listen, this story, Stephanie Kinsella, CFRA, has done a great job on this story. I believe she's broken the story. Everybody's following it right now. Just walk us through it. With all sorts of comments on this story already. I've been getting emails on it. Your fence, in a nutshell, your fence, an $18,000 fence that you put up and a neighbor complained about. This has been going on for a year, this whole saga. It was taken down today, understand, stake by stake, City of Ottawa Bylaw. Walk us through the story if you can, Mo. How did this all start?
I actually started probably 3 years ago, and it started from my driveway. I used to get complaints about too many cars in the driveway.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to have 4 or 5 cars. I'm not allowed to have, I'm not allowed to buy a car for winter or summer. It's just not allowed, but everyone in the neighborhood actually has 4 or 5 cars around here. But my house used to get targeted. Then I went to the backyard to the kids' play structure, then a ladder in the front yard when I was killing bees, Christmas lights, just snow. And went on for years. And eventually we put a fence in last year because the play structure wasn't, so I had to put a fence around it, so I put the fence in. And then after that, we got a complaint about the fence. So my neighbor behind and I, we both got this side corner lot, so the fence runs around the street side. There's no neighbors affected by it whatsoever, just dog walkers and places for dogs to do their business. And basically that's, it kept bothering this person, and he made around 4 or 5 complaints about it. They couldn't really find any reason, and then eventually they said, well, I think we should move it probably 2 feet as our calculation. You're off by a foot or two.
No, Mo, can I interrupt? Can we just back up just for a minute here? It's curious, you're talking about parking in your laneway and cars. Last week we talked a little bit about driveways in the suburbs. They're proposing doing something new with driveways. For exactly that reason, they're finding a lot of the suburban councillors say there's just not enough parking space for residents, so they're thinking about doing something different. So it's interesting you mentioned this. But what kind of fence was it? Was it a wooden fence, an $18,000 fence? Was it a wooden fence, a straight?
No, it's actually a special fence. It's probably only available in the States. One place that makes it, special ordered, and it comes up once in a blue moon here. And it's basically a composite recycled material. It's not PVC, but it's a type of plastic.
Right.
And
okay.
It looks like a stone pattern to it. It looks like stone masonry, but it's actually plastic.
Okay. And the reason you put up the fence, was it to fence off your play structure? Is that what got you putting up the fence?
That's what the complaints were I was getting before, yes. That my play structure is on the side of the road, I guess in my backyard, but since I'm a corner and it looks tempting to kids, it's not safe, so the guy complained about that for a while.
This is your neighbor who was complaining. It's a
neighbor that can't see the backyard, but it's not a neighbor joining my property. It's a neighbor that can't even see the backyard.
Let's leave the neighbor nameless for the moment.
We don't know who it is.
All right. So did bylaw agree, though? Did bylaw say you had to put up a fence in order to...
No. I just did it just for the sake of the neighborhood, and I figured whoever it is, to please whoever it is. I tried to please them. I sold a car, and I tried to please the neighborhood, whoever this was bothering, and I was just trying to have no qualms with anybody in the neighborhood. Not that I do, but... So put a fence around. Now, did you check with bylaw on the story here? You said it says that you checked with bylaw. You checked with the city before you went ahead and put in the fence. Correct. The hydro line wasn't put in exactly straight, and there was like a double loop line. So when the locates were put in, the numbers, I guess the builder sold the property to us. The numbers didn't match. The numbers that I had looked like it was close to the hydro line. The other one was close to the other side. So we We just wanted to make sure. I said, I looked at the other fences and they're the same distance, 9 feet. A block over is at 9 feet. The other guy on the left is at 9 feet. So I said, it looks like it's supposed to be 9 feet. So, and that's what our papers say, but the contractor wasn't too sure. He says, I don't know. I want to be sure. So can you call it in? So we called it in and the speaker phoned it and the neighbor witnessed it. And we all were told the same thing, to put it 9 feet from the curb.
To bylaw. So you phoned in the City of Ottawa bylaw. They said put it 9 feet from the curb.
Yeah, we called 311. They dispatched it to a bylaw officer. He said, I'm the one that comes out word for word. I'm the one that's going to ticket you. I'm the one that's going to come down and inspect it. Don't go over 6.5 feet. Don't go past 9 feet from the curb. That's what I'm telling you, and that's what we did. And
Okay.
I think Bell was close by. The guy was working on it. I asked him, he said, yeah, I've got no problem with it. And he said, the city had no problem with it. It was no issue with snow, no issue with anything. There was no impeding. The winter went by. There was no issue whatsoever. It was safe. It was installed. It was solid.
Right, professionally installed and what have you.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So the fence went up a year ago.
Yeah.
And right away, somebody in your neighborhood started complaining about your fence now.
Correct.
And what was the complaint about the fence? Well, I guess the distance from the curb and what have you. Whether you'd
No. First, he started off with the fence was too close to the mailbox. I don't have a mailbox on my property, so they closed that complaint. Then he said it's too close to a tree. Again, that tree wasn't on my property. Then he said it's too close to the green box. Then he just kept going on. He kept throwing darts until something could possibly stick.
And did bylaw investigate each of these complaints?
4 times bylaw came, senior officers were sent. We had meetings with the councillor, the chief of bylaw, and 4 times, every time they came, they had a different measurement.
My goodness, okay. Well, I assume something significant happened on the 4th visit. What happened on the last visit, Mo?
On the last visit, nothing. We said the snow issue, this, that, and I guess I left it up to the councillor and the chief to figure it out. I said, I don't want any more harassment. This has been going on for too long. Please, look into it. And I guess their concern was snow. Snow was coming, winter was coming, and winter went by, 10 months went by, and nothing happened. And then imagine as soon as the snow melted, they showed up and gave us a ticket for the fence.
So when did you get the ticket?
10 months later.
And that was this spring?
Yes, it was snow melted.
And the ticket was for the fence being too close to the curb?
Correct.
Okay. Were you told to remove the fence?
They said you have 2 options. We showed them our measurements, our maps and emails from the city and the builder and everything that we had. And they said, take it to court. If you don't think it's right, that's what we have. And we don't want to tell what we have anymore. This is what we told you to move it to. And maybe we shouldn't have. And now, maybe we made a mistake. But either way, just take it and it'll be a good case and just go to court and appeal it. And then you'll be fine. That's all I can advise to you. So we did that. We went to court. We filed it. And to this day, we haven't had a court date yet. And there's been no verdict. We went to City Hall on June 10th, just double-checked. We had meetings again. Councillor Manette said, I can declare the land, do something to just appease this situation. He was trying to help a little bit, but Obviously, I don't know. They weren't in the mood. The bylaw wasn't in the mood, or maybe at the time, or there was the real estate or the easement and hydro. And it was just basically all confusion for nothing. And nobody really wants to start anything. And I guess nobody started anything, so hence It's still sitting where it is. And I understand they're doing their job, and I understand that. And I said you should just change the law. The law needs to change that people can't.
So Mo, what happened? Mo, we're almost out of time, but just quickly. So what happened today?
Today they came in with no notice, and they just in the morning the trucks woke up the whole street. Everyone's babies were crying in the morning, and all the neighbors came outside.
No notice. You were not expecting them this morning.
No.
Okay. And when you say they showed up, it was bylaw that showed up. Who all showed up?
Bylaw, we had dump trucks, tractor trucks, beaver, suction cup, police officers, 3 of them, and some hydro vehicles, and I couldn't tell, right to the end of the street, one end to the other end.
3 police cars?
3.
That's a pretty dangerous fence you got there, Mo.
Yeah, and the whole time when all the work was being done, there was lightning going on, the people were using metal shovels, jumping on the holes, they just filling them up with dirt, and nobody was using any precaution whatsoever, because obviously the fence was not dangerous. Otherwise, you wouldn't be jumping in the same hole you just took the fence out of and filling it with dirt with steel-toed boots. Okay.
So,
and they tried.
Bo, you're out the $18,000 you paid for the fence. I understand the City of Ottawa is also going to be giving you a bill for everyone that was out there today for the cost of taking down your fence. I don't know what the cost of that would ultimately be, but you've been told you're going to get a bill from the city?
I haven't been told. Like I said, I didn't know they were coming today, so the city hasn't really told me much other than Jim Watson replied saying, if safety was a concern, that's what he was told. Maybe he's been told incorrectly. That's the problem. He's just going by what he's got, so I understand he's doing his job again. I'd love to sit and talk with somebody in the city and go over the facts, and they could probably see, clearly that there is no potential danger. Every fence that's near a green box is 2 or 3 feet from a green box, and so was mine. And if that's the potential danger, the trees and the flooding and the sewers that are backing up here are a lot more dangerous than that fence would ever have been. And it's never posed any threat, and it wasn't posing no threat now. And
so, Mo, you received an email from the mayor today after this story broke on CFRA. The mayor contacted you and said
Correct.
he had been told it was a danger, and that's why it was removed.
That's all he had, and he was actually on holidays all week. I tried to go to his office last week and talk to him, and we'd try to get in touch, but obviously he didn't have much to go by. They didn't even know where the hydro line was till they actually started removing the panels. The hydro showed up after the fact and sprayed the lines before they even started. They had the order to rip out the fence without even knowing the hydro line was. The guy put locates in after the fact. So it's kind of ironic.
This is quite a saga for one fence. I'm going to give the last word to you. What has this experience been like? And last comment, Mo, on the dangerous fence that was removed today on Glendenning Crescent in Orleans. What do you think of all this, Mo?
I think there's a brown fence that came down today, and if you look around, drive around, I welcome people to drive around the neighborhood. You'll see white fences and other black fences, and different color fences are all standing metal fences closer to this. If it is a serious issue, I would have taken it down myself. I've got 4 children that play around that fence. I'm not going to put my kids in jeopardy, and I have no problem with any neighbor. If they want to come talk to me, we'll talk it over. City wants to please somebody, anybody in the city that wants to sit down, I can come in and we can change the law. I speak for probably half the city. I got parking tickets in my driveway for parking in my driveway. Like, this has been a very awful experience, bad taste, and I don't know I think the law needs to honestly be changed, and they shouldn't be able to take action so just suddenly without notice. We have a court date. You assume you're innocent until proven guilty. Well, obviously I was guilty before I had a chance to even say anything.
What's it been like dealing with the City of Ottawa?
City of Ottawa, most of the people, I guess it's very hard at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock, they're not open. So this morning it was kind of hard to get a hold of anybody. BYLAW's doing a really good job showing up, very punctual. They're always on my door. They're doing good. I don't have any problems with any of the officers. I know they're doing their job, but I think they need to have a little more power and discrepancy. I think there was a story done to CBC last month in Toronto, same idea. One person complaining about 50 houses. And I think, the mayor, the city, they should be given an opportunity to homeowners to go in and discuss.
Well, Mo, listen, I know you've had quite the day today. I certainly appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us on the show. I hope you keep us posted and updated on this story.
Thank you. I will. Thanks for your time, too.
Thanks very much. That is Mo Hayter. Again, Mo Hayter had his fence removed. Something else had happened in Ottawa today. What do you think of this story? We're going to throw the phone lines open right now. 521-8255. Anybody have any thoughts on this story? You have a story of your own? Star 580. Free call if you're on the Bell Mobility System. And the toll-free number, love to hear from you. You're outside the city. You can phone in and quickly laugh at us here. 1-800-580-CFRA, 580-2372. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Now back to Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
Just coming up on 724, 580 CFRA. What do you think of this story? Mo Hayter's fence, the dangerous fence that was taken out, brought down today out in Orleans. Just quickly, if you heard the interview with Mo, a few things I'd like to bring your attention to. He says that he has been in contact with BYLAW over this fence 4 times. He says he has emails showing the interaction, the back and forth with BYLAW. He says he has contacted BYLAW initially, asked where the fence should be placed. He then says that there was emails back and forth with BYLAW. They came out, they saw the fence 3 times he passed. On the 4th, he failed. So I'd like to bring that to your attention. Linda Anderson, Chief of BYLAW Services, had this to say about this story when she was contacted by Stephanie Kinsler here at CFRA. The property owner should have a survey of their property. I have a survey of it. You get that little dig, that little sneering kind of a dig? Well, I have a survey. It's a relatively new home. Anybody building a fence should take a look at the survey to determine where their private property line begins. Is it as simple as that? When we talked about driveways last week, we had numerous calls from people with similar kind of story, not about a fence, but about the driveway and whether their driveway was on city property or not, whether the easement, what have you. And there was confusion. There is sometimes this confusion over this. So I don't know whether it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's not. And again, Mr. Hayter says that he contacted the city, went on the information the city gave him, then had a problem. The other thing I would like to bring to your attention just before we go to the phones is apparently this seems, and I don't want to go too far on this, but it does seem like there's some sort of vendetta happening out there. A neighbor is complaining. We do not know the neighbor's name. I do not wish to know the neighbor's name. Nobody phone in and with the neighbor's name. Don't do this to me on a Monday night. But we've heard stories like this before as well, and we've talked about this on the show, that in the city of Ottawa, it is incredibly easy to complain. We make it easy to complain. Click and complain. It's as simple as that. Go online, click, and you can file a complaint. Mr. Hayter has had dozens of complaints, bylaw complaints, made against him by a person. He cannot find out the person. Bylaw will not tell him who the person is. Driveways, you've heard him say, I've received parking tickets in my driveway. There's been a problem with his driveway. There's been a problem with his play structure. There's been a problem with his fence. It seems anything he does, a neighbor is going to complain about, and the city of Ottawa is going to take it seriously. 4 times bylaw goes out there. You might want to have a comment as a taxpayer, as a ratepayer. 4 times bylaw is sent out to inspect this fence. On the 4th visit, they find something is wrong. Then, you heard them, 3 police officers, numerous bylaw vehicles, Hydro One vehicles. They basically shut down Glendon Crescent out in Orleans. It's effectively a shutdown, a lockdown throughout the day to remove a fence. His fence. 521-8255. Mo, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be laughing, but it boggles the mind, parts of this story. Star 580, that's a free call if you're on the Bell Mobility System. Now, any and all comments on this? Do you think Mo did enough? Did he make some mistakes there that you would not have made? The survey, Linda Anderson says the survey, the mayor has been in touch with them. Mayor Watson has simply said it was a dangerous fence, had to be removed. There you go. End of story. Dave, you're phoning us from Navan. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Ron. I gather this fence was on city property?
They're saying it encroached on city property.
Okay,
yes.
Unfortunately, that's not a good scenario. All I wanted to say was that your colleague, Nick Vandergraaf, is better versed than I am, but I would suggest Mr. Hayter get in contact with the Ontario Landowners Association. There was a judgment by the Supreme Court some years ago now, Walker versus the Attorney General of Ontario, where the judge specifically stated what the city does not own, the city cannot plan for. Private property is private property. Bylaw has no business there. So if the fence was on his property, frankly, in my opinion, he can probably get his money back for that fence.
Well, I guess it was, according to the city, it was partially on his property, but encroached on city property. So part of the fence was on
Well, if it was
city
on city property, that's a problem.
Yeah,
it has to be on private property, because if it was on private property, they couldn't touch it. Even if the neighbors complain, you can paint your doors pink. If they don't like it, they don't have to look at it.
Dave, you sound like a man who's about to paint his door pink. I hear what you're saying. Just let's be clear on this. The fence, according to the city, it was on partially on his property, partially on the city property. That's why they took it down and encroached on a hydro line as well. Again, according to Mo Hayter, he checked on this, contacted the city, was told it was okay, put up the fence. 3 times bylaw came out to check his fence, and it passed. On the 4th, he says there's a different measurement every time. On the 4th, they had a measurement that he failed. Today, the fence taken down, $18,000 out the window, and he will be billed the cost of the city removing the fence. So there is the story. Your thoughts, 521-8255. If you're waiting to get on the show, I'm going to ask you please be patient. If you're on hold now, guarantee it will get you on the show. Just going to stop quickly for the news, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. This is Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
Already started to get a few emails on Mo's dangerous fence. Email address unscripted@cfra.com if you want to fire a quick note in. Let's go back to the phones. I want to welcome Colin to the show.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Colin. Good evening.
all I don't understand with this fella is his prior to having his fence built, he must have had all the permits and everything okayed by the city. As you stated, he was checked 3 or 4 times.
Well, this was after the fence was built. Now, his story, and, people may have a comment on this, by all means. He says that he contacted the city, phoned 311 with the contractor, with the person that was going to make the fence, and he was then transferred to BYLAW. Again, BYLAW Services is making a big deal out of the fact that he has nothing in writing. And now you heard him on the show. He's advanced the story a little bit. He says that the call was made with a neighbor and with a contractor there. They all heard the conversation. It was on speakerphone. He said he spoke to BYLAW and that he was given, where the fence should be located, so far from the curb on his property, yada, yada, yada. Then he had somebody put up the fence, so he would assume the person putting up the fence, he didn't do it himself. He hired someone. So he assumed that person would take care of all that. The fence went up, and then the neighbor started complaining.
The bylaw in Ottawa has way too much power. And the other thing is, I thought our system was based on if someone puts a complaint against you, I thought we were allowed to face our accusers in this country.
No.
That is ridiculous.
Colin, we did a full show on this not too long ago. I forget what got us started on this, but
so it can be anybody, and they don't have to. They can complain, and they don't have to have any grounds for a complaint just to complain.
You cannot.
That's not right.
You cannot find out who did the complaint. As a matter of fact, as I'm speaking to you, Colin, it's coming back to me. It was a news story about a fellow that had gone to court making that exact argument. I forget what the complaint had been. I think it has something to do with a pet, if I recall. A neighbor had complained about a dog barking or some such thing. And this person wanted to find out who had registered the complaint, took it to court, and lost. And the decision from the judge was that no, you do not, on bylaw issues, when it's a city employee involved, they have the right to anonymity. You cannot find out who was making the complaint.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it is.
That has to change. We got to do something to get that changed.
Colin, thank you very much for the call tonight.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Actually, now that I think about it, Mo's dangerous fence actually is connecting up with a few stories we've talked about on the show in the last little while. Do you remember that show we had about bylaw? And there was a court case. I'll try to dig it up for you. I don't know exactly what happened, but there's a court case where a person went to court, wanted to find out who had made the complaint. The city refused to say, and a judge backed the city, saying, no, if you file a complaint, you have an expectation of privacy, and anonymity is crucial. It's paramount. You cannot find out who filed the complaint. In Mo's case, again, and this has been confirmed, this we're not just taking Mo's word on this, bylaw has visited him dozens of times for cars, for his laneway, for his play structure, now for his fence. And he has no idea who's filing the complaints. Diane, also phoning from Navan. Good evening, Diane.
Hi, Ron. I am so upset by hearing about this story. My heart goes out to this man. There's a couple of main issues here. And number one, you've mentioned it, this right to anonymity somehow supersedes the person's right to the enjoyment of their private property. And the colossal waste of money on behalf of our city, instead of trying to solve problems in this city, the bylaw is pandering to these, I'm going to put it out there in a nutshell, idiots who are making unfounded complaints, and it's just nuisance calls, and they're really upsetting a lot of people. I'm sure that this Mo and his family have suffered a lot because of these ridiculous complaints. And I, as a taxpayer, I am livid, and I hold Jim Watson accountable because our money has been wasted in this action today. And sure, this poor guy is going to get a bill, but it's nothing compared to all the time and energy that has been put into this action by the City of Ottawa, all these visits out there to measure the property line or whatever the excuse of the day is. And in the end, we're spending more and more money, and I hope Mo goes to court, and he needs to know that there are cases like this around the province. I know there's a young man out by Plantagenet Way, who's facing this in front of the courts right now. And I can tell you right now, from the little bit that he did say today, I know that there was things the city did there today that are against the law. And that makes me so mad that my tax money is being wasted in harassing a citizen of this city. Like, do we not have any pride in solving problems? We just seem to be creating them. I'm so upset I can't even express as well as I'd like to. And this will go on and on and on. The city will hire a whole team of high-priced lawyers to fight this in court, to waste our money further and further. And this guy will have, snowball's hope and hell's chance of fighting it, because he won't have the same resources that the city has to throw at it. And that is wrong. Every citizen is innocent until proven guilty. And for our city to do this to a citizen, somebody who cares enough to put up a nice fence, it just boggles me. Like, what are we doing to advance the cause of this city? Well, and to be one that's friendly to the citizens instead of this acrimonious, heavy-handed attitude that we have in terms of bylaws. There's so many bloody bylaws out there, even the bylaw inspectors don't understand them all, and that was obvious. They had to go out there so many times to deal with this. I mean, if they had spent $1,000 and got a survey done, they would have known for certain where the property line was, and there would have been no question. And this gentleman, if he saw the facts, probably would have moved it nicely. Or on the other hand,
contact your counselor. I encourage you to contact your counselor. I can see this story is bothering you. Rightly so. By the way, Stephanie Kinsella, great job on this story. CFRA is breaking the story. I know for a fact that the Citizen and the Sun are both covering it tonight. So, you'll be able to see it online later tonight. You'll be able to read it in the newspaper tomorrow. If the story bothers you, contact the counselor. And I wonder if anybody has a photo of what the street, again, Glendon Crescent out in Orleans, what that must have looked like today. If anybody's living out there, if you took a photo. Again, according to Mo, there were 3 police cars out there today to oversee the removal of this dangerous structure. Numerous bylaw officials out there, Hydro One officials out there. So he said the street was just basically, it was a lockdown on the street. You couldn't get in and out as they took down his fence. So if anybody has a photo, send it to me. I'd love to see it. But, follow the story. If it bothers you, contact your counselor. I encourage you to contact your counselor. Let's go out to Stittsville, talk to Terry on this. Terry, good evening.
Hi, Ron. Thank you for taking my call, first-time caller. I think your prior caller certainly touched on a lot of issues that struck to mind when I heard this story when it broke earlier on your show. It certainly is a proven fact that one individual, how they can make things very miserable for others, and that individual certainly not having a chance to basically, yes, he's filed an issue with court, but by the time that does foresee take place, kind of the cart before the horse, so to speak. The fence is already down and gone, and he's never had a chance. It sounds like bylaw really does not know what they're doing. So they, if nothing else, should have given them the benefit of the doubt until things were investigated thoroughly, and then proceed as they did today if there was a need to. And I can rest assure you they will not be coming back to rebuild it if it is proven that they were wrong.
No, they won't. They won't. Bo is in tough here. I hope it works out for him. I shudder to think what the bill might be for this. It reminds me of another story. The degree is completely different, but the Duke of Somerset, that commercial property at the corner of Somerset and
Bank in Somerset, yes.
Exactly. When that building, collapsed, when the rear of it collapsed a little bit, the city went in immediately, and you probably recall this, and they just shut down that entire intersection.
That's right, for quite some time.
For quite some time, and they shut it down. It was a block dimension, so I think an entire city block, in fact, was shut down for about 3 months. And then they sent the owner the bill for that, if you recall that whole story. Yep. And the city being the city, it's not that they sent him a bill. They added that amount onto his taxes. Exactly.
Thanks for being a good citizen.
Yeah, and it was over, how much was it? It was over $250,000, if I recall, or something more. So what the cost for 3 police cruisers and, a company of bylaw officers would be, I think, Shudder Mo Hader is about to find out the cost of that. So.
Right, and this sounds like it's not, natural. We have to give the benefit of the doubt. There are 2 sides to every story, but I'm amazed at how composed he's kept himself.
Yeah.
just listening to him during your interview with him and whatnot. But it's unfortunate that certainly, no matter what, you bent over backwards, and it sounds like he certainly tried to appease whoever this individual was. And it sounds like it was probably one individual. And I think he used the term, they were basically shooting darts to see what would stick.
Yeah.
And obviously this stuck. And if they certainly can't be accurate about something, especially to that degree, then they certainly should not have taken the action that they did.
Terry, a great call. I hope I hear from you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
As Terry, let's take one more before we have to go to break. Let's go to Anne. Phoning us from Ottawa. Good evening, Anne.
Hello, Ron. With regards to the fact that there's nothing that can be done about a complaint or they have no way of following it, there is a major problem in the way everything is done in this city. I talked with a neighbor about a hot tub with no enclosure at all. You can't do this. It's dangerous. There's young kids wandering around. Someone could fall in it. Anyway, got nowhere. So finally called 311. Ended up, the person that I was making the complaint about knew someone who worked in the city, got all my personal information and spread it around the neighborhood that I made the complaint. And when I followed this up with my counselor and with the city, only people who are access to this are supposed to be able to get the information, but this individual managed to get the information anyway. They had no way of tracking who acquired information or how they acquired it.
Anne, we've spoken about this before. I recall you phoning in when we did that show talking about this. It's just an absolutely incredible story. What did you end up doing about this? Or was there anything you could do?
No, there was nothing I could personally do other than the fact I know the person did get a warning. He did get a fine. He did have to remove everything or put a fencing up. He did.
And just so I'm clear, Anne, did you complain? Were you the person that complained about the hot tub?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
But I spoke with him first.
Okay.
To try and resolve it on a personal level. And it got nowhere. But the fact was, people within the city can get access and get your personal information, even though they're not supposed to be able to. And they do it. And the city has no way of tracking back on that.
And I don't know exactly what happened there, but I do recall your phone call from some months back quite distinctly now, because you were saying that you supported the idea of anonymous complaints. You were on that side of that debate. You said there should be anonymity for people complaining. There should be. However, what you should be doing first is trying to address with your neighbor about an issue. Yeah. However, if you do make a complaint, it shouldn't go helter-skelter. Yeah. And I agree. I remember your call again, and you had an interesting take on it. Most of the callers, and I have a bit of a problem with the anonymity issue, and it sounds like you did do the right thing by speaking to your neighbor initially, a common courtesy that is often overlooked nowadays. So, and you did the right thing. I'm going to find that story quickly about the anonymity. I'll give you the judge's reasoning on why complaints should be anonymous to the City of Ottawa. And if you're waiting to make a comment on Mo's dangerous fence, please be patient. We're going to be right back, right on the phones after these quick messages.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Now back to Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
We're going to try to dig up that news story for you during the break. If anybody remembers that show, it was just a few months ago. Part of the news story is coming back to me. It was a gentleman who a neighbor had complained about his pet. I remember it was a pet complaint of some sort. Turned out to be nothing to it. The person that, got the bylaw visit was so upset about it, he went to court to find out who had filed the complaint. He did this after the City of Ottawa refused to tell him who had filed the complaint. They said it's the policy not to reveal the complainer. We won't tell you who the complainer is. expectation of privacy, anonymity, blah, blah, blah. He went to court and he argued that he should be able to face his accuser, that argument, and a judge ruled against him, took the side of the city, saying that it was crucial for the system to have anonymous complaints. So he never did find out who it was that complained about rovers barking or whatever the heck it was. We'll find that news story for you during the break. First, though, I want to welcome Alberta to the show. Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. I have concerns about that fence that went up. Did the gentleman not have a survey done? And would you not take your plans to the City Hall and to the Planning Department or whatever they're called to get it approved? Because it's my understanding he did go over on city property. He did go over on the hydro encroachments, and that's not right. And also, how high was this fence?
It was it was not more than 6 feet. You heard him say that it was not over 6.5 feet.
It was not over 6.5. No.
I'm looking at Stephanie's story here. It doesn't have the height. But he said during the interview that he was told not to make it higher than 6.5.
Yeah, because I think the maximum you can go is 7 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just surprised, he was going to the BYLAW visit him, but before I'd start an $18,000 fence, I would certainly have it down, my plans, and have the city put their stamp of approval on it. And was this fence out front of his property?
Yeah, it was three sides. You heard him say that he's at a corner lot, so it was a three-side. It went on three sides of his property.
Yeah. It's just I'm just wondering why he would go ahead and do something without something in writing, and why he went on city property and the hydro encroachment. So I think he is perhaps at fault from what I hear.
Well, Alberta, I'm glad you phoned in, because I do believe there are two sides to this story, or there could be two sides. But I could try to answer some of your questions, ma'am. Just what Mo said during the interview, and I'll give you his explanation, and then quickly you can respond whether it's good enough. He hired somebody to do the fence, so there was the expectation that the person doing the fence was going to handle all that. He said that he did contact the city before he went ahead to see where the fence should be positioned. You heard him say this. Now, BYLAW says that wasn't enough. BYLAW saying exactly what you're saying. He should have had something in writing. He admits that he didn't. He said he phoned BYLAW, spoke to them, was told it had to be 9 feet from the curb, can't be more than 6.5 feet tall, et cetera, et cetera. He did all that, or thought he had done all that, built the fence, and then the BYLAW visits came afterwards, after a neighbor, we're assuming a neighbor, and I don't believe we're wrong, complained about the fence, and then BYLAW started coming out to see him. And that's when he got all the BYLAW visits after the fence had been constructed. So, I don't know. Do you still think he should have done more?
Well, I would say the contractor that he hired is at fault. If they didn't follow the plan and they went on city property, and I'm just not sure why he didn't have it all documented. The plan. This is where the fence is going to go, and get
Alberta,
the city approval.
Albert, I apologize. I am going to jump in because we are running out of time, but I do want to make the point that BYLAW visited 3 times and inspected the fence, according to Mo, and said the fence was fine. So the problem is that there's great ambiguity and confusion over the setbacks, the easements, the 9 feet. 3 times BYLAW visited in response to a complaint and said his fence was fine.
But does he have it down in writing? Does he have a document to show, okay, this is okay, the city said it was okay?
Well, he's got the emails. He's got there's a report of them responding to the complaint. There's been some sort of document.
He's got his plans that he's corresponded by email.
Yes, he does have emails, yes.
Okay, and the city said before he started that this is okay.
He doesn't have that email. He doesn't have that email.
Okay,
Alberta.
If you stick to this plan, it's okay.
Yeah, no, what he has is emails and correspondence for the BYLAW visits after the fence was built. And again, 3 times he passed. On the 4th time, he failed, and they removed the fence.
I just said there's 2 sides to the story, because the fence that I I just got a bit of it on television tonight, and I thought, yeah, that might be an ugly-looking fence to have in your neighborhood.
There you go. Alberta, I'm so glad you called in. Thanks very much, man.
Thanks, bye.
I got one more call on. We want to bring Kevin on. Kevin's been waiting patiently. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you doing, Ron?
Doing fine.
Good. My question is it's about Verizon and Telus and Bell and this whole issue up to the minister that if he'll give them the opportunity to be ahead of the big three. And a lot of
Does this have anything to do with Mo's fence?
Pardon me?
Does this have anything to do with Mo's dangerous fence?
No, has to do with Verizon.
Verizon.
Yeah, Verizon.
Kevin, listen, I'm going to put you on hold. I want to take one more quick call on Mo. There's a lot of people waiting to talk about the fence. We will get to you, Kevin. Bill, though, I want to make sure we get Bill on the show before we stop for the news. Good evening, Bill.
Hi, Ron. It doesn't have anything to do with the fence, but it's related. Okay, the city bylaw has just sweeping powers, so they can do whatever they want, and they just seem to get away with it. I could relate countless instances. But do you know that at the end of St. Laurent Boulevard, when you cross over Walkley and that turns into the business park?
I know it well, absolutely.
Okay, and at the end there's a mosque.
At the end there, sorry?
At the end of that street, St. Laurent, I think it hits into Cobden or something like that, there's a mosque there.
Okay, this is at the end of St. Laurent where it hits into Walkley and continues
No, it
into the
twists
business
around
park?
Walkley and then it goes up a street.
I see what you're saying. I'm going to back up. I don't know as well as I thought. But okay,
anyway, there's a mosque there. And every Friday between 12 and 2 o'clock, there's literally hundreds, maybe 1,000 cars parked there illegally everywhere. They park on your property. They park on the grass. They block the bus lanes. They do everything. And we put complaints in countless, and there's never a ticket issued.
You've never seen a ticket issued?
Never. It doesn't matter if you call or anything. They won't touch it because I think it's a political issue.
Well, Bill, to be honest with you, I've done stories about tickets that were given outside churches, Christian churches, during Sunday service. I think that is, that's bogus. It's low rent. It's not appalling. That's going too far. But anyways, I've written stories on that. And if somebody received a ticket outside a mosque on a Friday afternoon, I'd feel the exact same way. So I don't know. I can't be all that upset with that because I have been upset when it's happened in front of Christian churches. So, fair is fair. So I wouldn't be upset with that. I hope they never do get a ticket. 521-8255. We managed to clear the phones, actually. Actually, don't call. Have you ever heard this before? Don't call. We're going to be back right after the news. We'll throw the phones open then.
Live on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Real people, real stories. It's Ron Corbett, Unscripted.
806 News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Down here in the market, the sky's been cleared by a good hard rain. Somebody's calling my secret name. You know what song that is? Anybody know what song that is? We'll play it for you. A great old song. Sky's been cleared by a good hard rain. Somebody's calling my secret name. Anybody know what song that is? If you know what it is, give us a shout. We'll play it for you if you can figure it out. Getting some emails on Mo's dangerous fence. This comes from Scott. Ron, unbelievable. Yet sadly, when it comes to how things get done these days, and in particular in this misguided city, it is totally believable. There is just a general lack of judgment in this land from top to bottom. Witness the Lac-Megantic tragedy, an accident that was waiting to happen. If Mo was told it was okay by the city, it's the city that must pay. And by the way, is this a police state that we have raids like this one to take down Mo's fence? I must say, it sounds like it was just an absolute circus out on Glendon Crescent earlier today. 3 police cruisers, BYLAW cars all up there, hydro vehicles all over the place. Mo said, what's a crescent? Glendon Crescent. He says there were city cars, some sort of fashion, from one end of the street to the other to take down his fence earlier today. So, your thoughts on this story? 521-8255. I asked you not to call in. I didn't want anybody holding over the news, but we had a full house there for most of the show on this topic. If you're unable to get in, what do you think? What do you think of the city did? Like Alberta, do you think the city has a point here? The city has a point. It says it encroached on city property. They received a complaint. They were out there investigating numerous complaints. I guess one of the complaints was about the height it passed, and then there were other complaints. The fence passed, and then they nailed him. They nailed him on encroaching on city property. He insists that he checked on this, built it to what the information he had been given by the city. No written record of this. And there you go. The fence is removed today. A bill for all this on its way to Mo Hyder. You heard him say he's father of 4. He has received complaints about cars in his driveway, his play structures, and now his fence. I have not been able, by the way, to find that news story I was talking about. I wonder if somebody out there, I'm going to be lazy here, I wonder if I can pass this on. I know there are people listening to the show, listen regularly, that are very skilled at research. Can somebody quickly dig up this news story for me? I know it was this year, or I believe it was this year. Time sometimes goes in confusing ways nowadays, but I believe it was this year. We did a full show on it. The news story, it was a gentleman, I believe it was a government worker. I don't know why I recall. I think he was a government worker. But a neighbor had complained about his pet. I believe it was a dog, some sort of a pet complaint. That's what started it. Turned out there was nothing to it, or he didn't get a ticket. There was no consequences to the complaint. Gentleman was so upset that he contacted the city and said, who filed the complaint? Who complained about my dog? The city would not tell him. Said that information is private. You cannot know who filed the complaint. He was very upset with this, thought, well, the argument, I should be able to face my accuser. So he went to court. Took the city to court. City argued, city lawyer, talking about expenses. The city brought out their lawyers, and he was self-repped, as I recall. City brought out its lawyers. City won. Judge in a written decision, explaining why the city needs to have anonymous complaints. By the way, we complain in the city of Ottawa more than any other city in the province. 3-1, almost 3-1. And this is a per capita thing. 3-1. It's a civic sport here in Ottawa. But if anybody listening, if you can find that news story, we'll take another look during the next break. But I've been unable to find it yet, but if anybody can find that news story, if you can quickly file it over to me, I'd love to read. I remember the judge's decision was quite interesting, how the judge worded the decision on the side of the city. Anyways, unscripted at CFRA.com. If anybody listening, if you can find that news story, we'll have another look during the break. Let me give you the numbers here, 521-8255, 521-TALK. That's a main number here at the Hal Anthony studio. If you have any thoughts on Mo's dangerous fence. If you live in the area, I'd love to find out what it was like out there today. Star 580, that's a free call if you're on the Bell Mobility System. And the toll-free number, 1-800-580-CFRA, 580-2372 is the toll-free number. Funnel clouds in Ottawa late this evening. Anybody listening, has anybody seen a funnel cloud? Out in Gloucester, I understand over a soccer pitch in Gloucester, that's definitely been one report of a funnel cloud. Some power outages in the city right now as well. Quickly give us an update on the storm that moved through the city at the start of the show or just before the show. 521-8255. Anybody seen a funnel cloud this evening? And has there been damages? Power out? Well, where is the power out? I know there's some power outages out in the East End. We're told out in the East End. So if anybody can give us an update on the storm and how it affected you, if you saw a funnel cloud, those are dangerous things. I hope nobody received much in the way of damages as a result of that storm. Oh, Ottawa South. We're going to throw out Ottawa South every evening this week. If you have some thoughts on the by-election on Thursday in Ottawa South, poll showing Matt Young, the PC's in the lead. Some debate as to how big that lead may be. Some say it's just a point or two. Others people saying it's approaching double digits. Depends who you're talking to, what poll you're looking at. But any thoughts on the Ottawa South by-election? Tim Hudak in town today here at CFRA, talking to Rick Gibbons earlier today. If you have any thoughts on Ottawa South, that's going to be a topic. I'll take any calls on that, running right up into the by-election. And if you have a bylaw story you'd like to share with us, 521 again, 521-TALK, 521-8255, main number here at the studio tonight. And let's go to Canada. Welcome Paul to the show. Hi, Paul.
Well, in regards to the city bylaws, the issue that I have with, I don't mind the thing of being anonymous in the sense that the city knows who is calling. But I've had a neighbor, and I know exactly who the neighbor is, that continually calls bylaw on my dog and on my fence and all different types of things like that. And in this 2-year period, I probably had bylaw here 20 times. And every time they come here, they just kind of shake their head and say, like, what's going on? And I said, well, my neighbor's just not happy with us because she wasn't happy the way we designed our garden, and whatever it was. But the city's got to realize, I mean, we have to take it to the point that we have to speak to our lawyer and say, look, this is being harassment via the city of Ottawa. I mean, this person was able to call and call and call, and I know who the person that's calling. I was able to find out who it was. And, you know, when you see the same number, same households that's calling all the time in another household, the city of Ottawa's got to be a little proactive on this and say, okay, what's going on here? There's more like going on than just, the dog barking. And I think this gentleman in Orleans had that issue where there was a lot of people calling about, or maybe it's the same person, but he seemed to be victimized in the sense that, people are always calling about him. Now, when it comes to the fence, if I was spending $18,000 on the fence, I'd be making sure my survey was correct and, I know where I'm going to be putting it. That's, kind of an issue there. You can't go by the city of Ottawa because they've already told me that they do not get involved in anything that's concerning the line of your properties. They know the bylaw they go by, and that's it.
Paul, and you're not the first caller on the show, nor the first emailer to say that. Perhaps he should have exercised a bit more caution, initially, right out the gate. That being said, bylaw has visited him 3 times. The fence passed 3 times, but you've had this experience. But if somebody keeps on complaining, bylaw still keeps coming out with a new complaint, and eventually maybe something sticks. Just the law percentages on this. I'm curious though, Paul. You said you hired a lawyer to. Well,
I have a friend that's a lawyer, and he's kind of my lawyer for different things, and I just talked to him about it, and I said at one point, because it was really wrecking our family life. It came to a point that we couldn't even be out on our deck during the summer. It wrecked the whole summer one year just because of this feud with this person.
Right.
And what this person, to give you the idea of what type of person this is, bylaw would come and contact us and say, whatever the issue was, and he'd come in and say, look, and say, okay, well, there's no problem. So then they would report back to the person who complained and say, well, we've investigated and it's all okay. Well, this person didn't like that answer, so they would go above their head. And they kept escalating it to the next manager, and all of a sudden, you're going to find something on somebody at some point. I mean, if you really, really want to sort of look at it. But in our case, we've been lucky enough that we haven't had anything. And I've had some really good, I'll be honest, I've had some very good bylaw officers that came here and kind of just shrugged their heads and said, okay, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I mean, to the point where someone...
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said 20 bylaw visits over the last 2 years?
At least 20.
At least 20.
And when bylaw couldn't come, the City of Ottawa police came.
My goodness.
Yep.
My goodness.
Because a dog, they figure a dog is barking too much. Well, we happen to live near a bike path, and my dog, if someone goes by, my dog will bark. But, I mean, we're usually outside with the dog, and I'll let him have 2-3 barks, and I say that's enough and stop. Well, for this other person, this is incessant barking. And when I talked to the bylaw, obviously he laughed. He says, no, incessant barking is like 45 minutes long. The cops, the dog doesn't stop barking. But,
So your neighborhood complainer has even got the police involved in all this.
Yeah, and the problem is because we're all townhouses. So, I mean, it's not like we're a single home and my next neighbor is not, 20 feet away. I mean, we're all attached together. So even more where I've even had police tell me, which I didn't agree. They said, well, maybe you think you should move. And I said, why should I move? Maybe the other person should move if they don't like the noise that's going on, if they want to live in a total silent neighborhood.
Paul, I'm so glad you called in. Again, I can understand why some people value the system where you can be anonymous when you complain. I can understand the argument that some people make, but it scares me, though, because it can be abused. The system could be abused so easily when you have that in place, and you're living proof of it. Like, why in the world should you have to put up with 20-odd bylaw visits over 2 years? It's just, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it came to the point that when we actually went to the bylaw offices to talk to them about it, and the person I was talking with at the desk said, well, they can easily bring up your address and see all the different calls and stuff, and they can't tell you who's calling, but I mean, I can tell by their eyes when they're looking that, okay. And at one point, it was one of these people that said, you know what, we're gonna get you in contact with our manager, and they talked to us about it and whatever. And I don't know what they did, but the calls have stopped.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Maybe some common sense is kicked in somewhere.
I hope so.
Paul, thank you very much for the call.
Okay, bye-bye.
Best luck. If you're waiting to get on the show, I'm going to ask you, please be patient. We're going to take a quick break here. See if we can dig up that news story. See if you can help us. Again, it was this year, the news story. A gentleman took the city of Ottawa to court trying to find out who had complained about his dog. City won the case. 521-8255. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. This is Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
I'm looking at a map right now. It's a map of complaints coming into the city of Ottawa's 311, and it's by ward. So they actually have broken it down to see where people are complaining the most in the city of Ottawa. It's a couple years old, this, but yeah, it was done in 2011. It's using 2010 figures in that year, and it goes up year after every year. It goes up a little bit, but 75,000 complaints came into 311 in 2010. These are bylaw complaints. So your fence, your pet, whatever, your driveway, on and on. These are the complaints. 75,000 complaints. And perhaps no surprise, but the downtown core, far and away, has most of the complaints. The old city of Ottawa before amalgamation, the wards in there, they are the highest. More whiners down there than anywhere else. It starts to tail off. I'll just make sure I'm looking at the complete map here. Yeah. It starts to tail off the further you go out of the core. Nepean still got a fair number of complaints. Out in Gloucester, the old city of Gloucester, still a fair number of complaints. And then it just drops. It just drops when you get out to the rural wards. Canada is still pretty high. But as soon as you get outside, when you get into Stittsville, when you get into heading out to Carleton Place, it just drops. Now why is that? Why is that? Tell me, why is that? People just behave better out in the country? You've never lived in the country. So why are there fewer complaints in the rural wards? Because people get along. Because, you have neighbors. You get along with your neighbors. Because you realize you go and talk to your neighbor before you pick up the phone and phone 311. The cost of this, by the way, to the taxpayers, 75,000 complaints, each of which has to be responded. The city does not have the option of saying, you're nuts. You are nuts, and this is a frivolous complaint. Patch it up with your neighbor. We're not going to spend any more City of Ottawa resources on your silly complaints. You can't say that. You jot down the complaint, write it down, dispatch the bylaw officer. It doesn't matter how crazy, nonsensical it is. The City of Ottawa needs to respond to every single complaint. That is the City of Ottawa policy. As I said, you can't just tell somebody that, this is crazy. We're not going to look into this. I bet you in some villages and towns, they do have the option. We're not going to look into that. No, we absolutely are not going to look into that. Here in the city, you got to look into everything. 75,000 complaints. Start figuring out what the cost on that might be. So there you go. And again, we complain more here in Ottawa than any other municipality in the province. It's not even close. We're like the Usain Bolt of whiners. Nobody can come close to us. We lap everybody else. So there you go. And it looks like that tripped up Mo Hader. If you are just joining us on the show, Stephanie Kinsella, CFRA Stephanie Kinsella has broken this story. The Sun and the Citizen, I know, are following it right now. So you'll be able to read stories online later today and in the newspaper tomorrow. But Mo put up an $18,000 fence. He says, though he has nothing in writing, but he says he contacted the city, spoke to BYLAW about what he needed to do for the fence to be in code. He was told it has to be no taller than this. It has to be 9 feet back from the curb. Information. He then had somebody build the fence and immediately started getting complaints about the fence. He has, over the years, had people complaining, and he suspects it's one person, complaining about his driveway, how many cars were in the driveway, whether the cars were, on the city property as part of the driveway. He says, I've received a parking ticket for a car that was in my driveway. You may have heard him say that during the interview. Well, anyways, it all came to a head today when the city of Ottawa arrived to take down his fence. On the fourth visit from BYLAW, they found a problem with the fence. It encroached on city property. First three BYLAW officers measured it. I don't know, there's something wrong with the tape, you tell me. But it passed 3 times. On the fourth time, it failed. And so they took out the fence today. Again, if you live out there in Orleans, Glendon and Crescent, love to hear from you tonight. I hear it's quite the show out there. And they took down the fence. He's going to receive a bill for the cost of taking down the fence. He says he would have liked a day in court to argue about this. He says that opportunity was taken away from him. So if you have any thoughts on that story, 521-8255. Also, if you can give us a quick update on the storm. I love it when we get quick calls when a storm goes through. Just very quickly we can update listeners on the storm. There are power outages in the city. 521-8255 if you can give us any update on that. And the funnel clouds. I'm very intrigued by reports of funnel clouds and whether there have been any damages as a result. If you saw any of these funnel clouds, again, 521-TALK, star 580, the toll-free number, 1-800. Give us a shout if you're outside the city. This is the show where you get a great opportunity to phone in and laugh at people living in the city. I can't believe you put up with that. 1-800-580-CFRA, 580-2372. Let's go to Mo, a different Mo. You're having a good night when you get to talk to two people called Mo.
I'm number one, Mo.
You're number one, Mo. How you doing?
Not too bad. I don't even know if I should be telling your listeners this, but I guess you probably know this. Some of them know this, but you could call the city any residential street in Ottawa. I mean, the quiet residential streets. If you're parked there for more than 3 hours, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., you can get a ticket for parking on the street. All you have to do is call the city and tell them there's people always parked on my street, and I want to complain about it. They'll send a BYLAW officer up, and they'll start marking tires.
Yeah.
And, if you're there for 3 hours, you're going to get a ticket.
Yeah. Mo,
pretty sad.
I agree with your opening comment. I don't know whether you should be telling people this. I don't want people to take advantage of it. But
I know it's a silly law. I mean, I've been ticketed twice on I live in Quiet Street in Barhaven, and I've got tickets twice. I didn't even know about it. And I got one on Sunday too. I couldn't believe you couldn't even park on your own street on Sunday for more than 3 hours.
You got a ticket on a Sunday on your street for parked there more than 3 hours?
And I live on a quiet residential street in Barhaven, and I mean, there's nobody drives on my street. It's quiet, and it's a small street, and it just takes one lady on my street that complains that people park on the street, and they send a BYLAW officer all the time up my street.
Yeah, Bo, I feel for you. I feel sorry for people that have neighbors like this. Knock on wood, I've never had a bad neighbor. Really, knock on wood, I've never had a bad neighbor, and Lord, it's a curse. I can only assume it's a curse if you have one. 521-8255. And again, a question for you. Sky's been cleared by a good hard rain. Somebody's calling my secret name. What song is that? You can figure it out. It's a great song. Figure it out. We'll play it for you. If you're on hold, try to get you on the show as soon as we come back after the news, bottom of the hour on CFRA.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. Now back to Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
I'd like to welcome Donna to the show.
Hi.
Hi, Donna.
Hi. I think I found the case you've been mentioning, and it involves a cat.
Oh, was it a cat? Okay.
Yeah, and it was a decision of an adjudicator from the Ontario Privacy Information and, let me see.
Yes.
Under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So they appealed, or they got a decision from an adjudicator.
Donna, good,
yes?
Good for you. I'm going to interrupt, but good for you. You're hired, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm so nervous even calling. I didn't even want to be on the air, but I wanted to, because I was all happy because I wanted to pass that on to you.
Wait, do you have the article? It was an Ottawa Citizen article? Is that what you're looking at?
It was that. Ottawa Citizen article dated April 11th, 2013,
Okay.
and it's by Don Butler.
Can you read the lead on it? Can you just read the first paragraph on that article if you have it right in front of you?
Okay, it says, even the Constitution couldn't help an irate Ottawa resident who wanted to know who ratted out his cat last July.
There you go. That's the exact story. That's the exact
And then,
story.
I guess he was annoyed, so he filed a request with the city under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Exactly.
Wanting full disclosure. The city provided some disclosure, but not the name. And then when he asked for the name, the city said no, because there's citing privacy provisions.
Exactly.
And then they even tried to speak to the complainant, whether he would be willing to give his information out, and he didn't want to. Like, I guess it went to mediation before it went to arbitration at the commissioner's office. So I guess the guy wanted to be, but I guess the commissioner didn't buy the guy's constitutional argument. I guess there wasn't enough to support it. So
is the gentleman's name in the article? The gentleman that...
No, he wasn't identified either.
He wasn't identified, so neither person's name is in there.
No, not that I can see anyways.
All right.
But I think, maybe it's he didn't have a good enough argument with...
Well, Donna, listen, thanks so much. I feel a bit lazy. I am a bit lazy. There's a reason. Sorry, I cut you off. There's a reason I'm feeling that way. But thank you so much for digging that up. I'm going to see if I can dig up the story now here on the computer.
So I gave you enough information then? Yeah, it was Don Butler, April 11th, 2013.
Perfect. Donna, listen, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
There you go. Donna thinks I'm kidding, but I'm not. 6:30. We need you down here at 6:30 tomorrow, Donna. We're going to look at that during the break, see if because it was a fascinating story. It really was. I want to get the privacy commissioner's reasons for the decision for siding with the city on that. I think you're going to find it quite interesting. Let's go over to Gatineau now. Welcome Mac to the show. Good evening, Mac.
Good evening, Ron. I kind of feel sorry for the harassment of Mo. But, every property owner should have a surveyor's registered diagram of their property and undertake nothing without either knowing where their property line is for sure in their heart or consulting it. He should get a survey done and registered with himself and with the land. Because, come to think of it, you can't really sell a property without one.
And yes, Mac, you're the other side on this debate, and I have heard this. And Linda Anderson, Chief of Bylaw Services, she made that point as well when she was speaking with CFRA earlier today, saying he should have a survey. I have a survey of it.
Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is that sometimes if you get a survey, you might find that the whole fence was on his property. There might just be a little variance between what is the modern day survey accuracy and say that which was done 30, 40, 50 years ago.
And Mac, I'm tempted to agree with you that, perhaps initially that Mo made some mistakes initially. I think I would agree with you on that.
And I would never deal with a government or anybody else on something so official in email. Registered letter.
Yeah. But Mac, I guess this is my question, and I'm not asking to change your opinion of this in any way, but I will grant that some mistakes were made initially. After that, those mistakes, though, how do you think of the way the city has handled this? Again, they've sent bylaw out there 4 times to check the fence. 3 times it seemed to be okay. On the 4th time, there was a problem. Why would you keep checking a fence 4 times? Like, do we have nothing else to do in this city that we have to keep driving out to Orleans to check Mo's fence? One more time for the world. Let's go. Honestly, 4 times.
Seems to be
and then to close down the street today with police cars, bylaw cars, hydro cars. In effect, a lockdown is the way Mo described it. Well, yes, he might have made mistakes initially, but I'm shaking my head at the way the city responded.
When you hear him say that he's filed with the court, he's going before. How can anybody act before the court is ruled if it's before the courts? If it's filed with the court, he may not have a date, but it is before the court.
Yeah.
And the last people who would ever give you anything is our municipalities or any level of government if something is registered with the court. You wait, we can't do this. We don't interfere in court cases or comment on court cases. You know that old line. So really, that to me is something else where, but I would have to say, look, the heavy-handedness of Ottawa bylaw officers is really legendary. And he was harassed, and I don't know how you get around somebody harassing, except maybe to try and find out, or file a complaint against the city for being involved in harassment. I don't know. I mean, it might cost him a lot more money than he thinks.
Oh, I think everything about this story, Mac, is going to cost him a lot more money than he thinks. I have a funny feeling $18,000 is just the beginning of it for Mo Hader and his dangerous fence. Mac, listen, thank you so much for the calling in tonight from Gatineau across the river this evening. Let's go up to the Pontiac. Let's bring Doug on the show for a minute.
How you doing, Ron?
Hi, Doug. I'm doing well.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty sad there with that $18,000 fence, what he's got to go through.
Yeah.
And, I was listening to what the other lad there with his dog, people complaining about his dog barking. This complaining thing is never gonna end.
What do you complain about up in the Pontiac?
I have nothing to complain about in the Pontiac. I have a dog, and I got the best neighbors in the world.
I have always had good neighbors. Again, knock on wood.
Yep.
Maybe I'm destined to have some bad ones at some point, everything being cyclical in life. But I've never had a bad neighbor, and it must just be a curse if you have one.
Well, my neighbor is good because I live beside a graveyard.
Okay. Oh, Doug, I didn't realize you were setting me up on that one.
No, I do. I live beside a graveyard.
Oh, I believe you.
Yeah.
So you have great neighbors.
Great neighbors, and they're very quiet.
On that note, Doug, I'm going to let you go. Thanks very much for phoning in.
Okay.
All right, that's enough joshing from Pontiac tonight. Let's go to Alta Vista. Let's welcome Patrick to the show.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Patrick.
I grew up in the 70s, and we didn't have bylaw officers. Do you remember that?
Did we not have bylaw? We had Green Hornets. We had, we must have had bylaw officers.
I don't remember them. Does Mo know who the neighbor is that is ratting him out?
No, he does not.
He doesn't?
He does not.
He does not.
Nor would the city tell him. I don't know if Mo's even bothered asking the city, but even if he asked.
Does he have an inkling?
I believe he's got an inkling. Yeah.
Well, the way we solved problems in the old days, you take a rock at 3 a.m.
No, Patrick.
And you throw it through the
Patrick, for crying out loud. What are you doing? Counseling somebody to commit a crime here on the show tonight? I don't want to start off the week that way, Patrick. Don't get me into trouble Monday night before 9 o'clock. Mo, if you're listening, disregard everything Patrick just had to say. And I believe there were bylaw officers around in the 70s as well. Wasn't the Wild West out here or anything. Or, I don't know. I was known not to start getting tickets, but I believe there were bylaw officers here in the 70s. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah. It must be a full moon tonight.
There must be.
Listen, they got, since the bylaw officers were given special constable rights, they're equal to a police officer. If a police officer were to come to your house and say that he had a complaint, he would have to divulge the complainant's name because you have the right to face your accuser, right?
John, I'm going to ask you to stop right there. The right to face the accuser. Here we go. We got the story right here. This is the argument. We have the story again. Donna, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So here is the story. April of this year. Even the Constitution couldn't help an irate Ottawa resident who wanted to know who ratted out his cat last July. In the tortured syntax beloved by bureaucrats, the City of Ottawa's Bylaw and Regulatory Services Department advised the man it had received a complaint alleging that, I remember this is the original complaint, alleging that a cat harbored at your residence may have been observed causing damage, creating a disturbance on July 5th, 2012. A cat harbored at your residence. Under city bylaws, the department primly pointed out cat owners are prohibited from allowing felines to cause damage or create a nuisance to others. Damage was never stipulated in there. Anyways, this gentleman, annoyed, And perhaps eager to defend his cat's honor, the man filed a request with the city under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, seeking full disclosure of records pertaining to the complaint, to the cat complaint. Boy, the pair of them are going to have fun here. The city provided most of the records, but withheld the complainant's name, address, and telephone number, citing privacy provisions in the Act. Unsatisfied, the cat owner appealed to Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner, relying on the Charter Rights and Freedoms to support his argument that the anonymous complainant should be unmasked. In an 11-page decision that came down on March 27th of this year, adjudicator Colin Badaracci sided with the city, concluding that disclosing the complainant's name, address, and phone number would constitute, here's a quote, an unjustified invasion of his or her personal privacy. Before the matter proceeded to arbitration, there had been a failed effort to settle the dispute through, this is a cat complaint, I kid you not. Anyway, so it went through mediation, eventually ended up at the arbitrator. The adjudicator found that the irate cat owner's constitutional argument was insufficiently particularized. That is a quote. He went on to say, he appears to be arguing in part that the Charter is paramount over the city's bylaws, or possibly the Act, but does not provide any detailed submissions to support this argument. On that basis, he dismissed the Charter claim. And now this is a quote that you might find interesting. I am satisfied, that quote just moved on me, just a minute. I am satisfied that the city weighed the competing interests of the appellant and the complainant in disclosure and non-disclosure and exercised its discretion to withhold the complainant's name, address, and telephone number. It clearly decided that the complainant's right to privacy is more compelling than the appellant's interest in disclosure. And that is the City of Ottawa policy. That exactly is the City of Ottawa's position. They will not tell you who complained about your cat, your dog, your fence, your car, your driveway, or the 1,000 other things that we find to complain about in this city. So there's a story. Again, I want to thank Donna very much for finding that. And if you have some thoughts on that court case and the anonymous complaint process and system that we have in the City of Ottawa. 521-8255. Nobody's guessing this song, by the way. Sky been cleared by a good hard rain. Disappointed. We're going to be right back after these quick messages.
You're listening to Ron Corbett Unscripted. Call 521-TALK, 521-8255. Ron will be right back on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA. This is Ron Corbett Unscripted on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
8:50, 10 to 9. Last few minutes of Unscripted this evening. Getting a couple emails from Mo Hader just at the end of the show. I guess he's been getting some comments and comments posted after Stephanie's story on CFRA. Again, Stephanie Kinsella, CFRA, broke this story. He says, sorry, the fence was brown. And you heard some callers, I guess, that have seen photos of the fence, said it is brown. So he's apologizing, saying, sorry, the fence was brown in color. He also wants to let us know that he will not be taking any rocks around the neighborhood anytime soon. So good on you, Mo, for not following that little bit of advice. Hey, I got a quick question here. Just see if you have enough time for this. I was going to ask this earlier, and then Mo's dangerous fence just kind of took over here. But I love cars. If you listen to the show regularly, you know I love cars. So sometimes I'll ask a little trivia question. Here's a quick question. See if somebody can get this just in a couple of minutes. There's an anniversary today of note for automotive history. I love the early automotive history, too. It's just some great old stories. But on this day in 1909, General Motors Corporation, GM, acquired another automobile company. Cost was $4.5 million. I want you to identify the other company that GM purchased this day in 1909. This second company was founded out of the ruins. I didn't know this until today. Founded out of the ruins of automotive pioneer Henry Ford's second failed company. His third effort was the Ford Motor Company, and yes, that one succeeded. I knew he had one previous failure. I didn't realize he'd had two, so this was the second one. when the shareholders of the defunct Henry Ford Company called in Detroit machinist Henry Leland to assess the company's assets for their planned sale, Leland convinced them to stay in business. His idea was to combine Ford's latest chassis with a single-cylinder engine developed by Oldsmobile. What was the company? What company? Henry Ford's, out of the ashes of Henry Ford's second failure. Boy, that's tenacity. Give it one more kick. Third time really is a charm. End up with the Ford Motor Company. What was the automotive company that GM purchased today back in 1909? Anyone want to take a quick guess? Brian, you're phoning from Centertown. Do you have a thought on Moe's dangerous fence?
Yeah. If this contractor that put up the fence, even if he didn't have a survey, there's a survey pin on the corners of the property. If you didn't want to pay for a survey, you just could have rented a metal detector.
You know, Brian, that's a good point. The house apparently is not that old either.
Yeah.
According to the City of Ottawa Bylaw, I have a quote here from Linda Anderson saying it's not that old, the house. So,
yes,
very good point. Maybe there was a pin. Maybe there was even a stake still visible.
Well, there is a pin usually on the four corners of the property.
Yeah.
Because my uncle was a surveyor.
Well, there you go.
And even if it's not on that property, you could run a line from where two pins are to find exactly where the corner of his property is.
Brian, let me ask you, I think you're going to be one of our last callers on this story tonight. What do you think of the story overall? What happened? And I think Mo might even admit today that he made some mistakes initially. Anyway, I don't want to lead you. What do you think of the story?
Well, I don't think it should have went that far.
No?
No, I think they should have waited until it went to court. And
you think he should have had a day in court?
That's right. If he was wrong, then he was wrong.
Yeah.
You know? And then there's another issue about divulging the complainant's name. We had a bylaw officer come to us a couple of years ago to tell us that someone complained about graffiti on the building. So I says, well, okay, we'll paint it and cover it up. That was not a problem. And he was a nice guy, and he was saying, well, you know, we have all these complaints to go to. And he showed me another complaint for another property, and it was unsigned, was anonymous. And he says, the call came in, we have to act on that phone call.
They have to, Brian. There's a few things. The system is just wide open for abuse, Brian. If you want to abuse it, you can do it easily. The anonymity is certainly a problem. The City of Ottawa has a policy of responding to each and every complaint. Again, we don't have the liberty of saying, well, you know, or the discretion to say, well, that's not worth investigating. We have to investigate and respond to everyone. So it's just open season. What about the guy that complained about Bob Dylan's face on the pub in Centertown? What was that pub called? Have you followed that story on Somerset Street?
No, I didn't see that one, but
there's a pub there on Somerset Street. Somebody complained about a mural of Bob Dylan.
That's crazy.
And bylaw told him he had to paint over the mural. And then eventually he managed to keep it. The community rallied around. Diane Holmes actually got involved in that one. So, but they will complain about Bob Dylan's face, Brian.
Imagine.
Well, and this wasn't scary Dylan either. This wasn't 1965 amphetamine Dylan or anything. This was, mid-70s Planet Waves Dylan. You know, this was basically a Smurf. And, they complained about that. So, I tell you, Ottawa.
Well, then there was another case he told me that some guy was nailed for graffiti or something, and he had to pay a fine. But ever since that time, he would run around the city, and every time he saw something, he would call BYLAW, and they had to go and investigate every piece of graffiti that this guy called in.
It's a whiner's paradise, Brian. I hear you. Hey, listen, great call. I want to thank you very much for phoning in tonight. Let's quickly see if we can get the answer to the General Motors question. Ian, do you know what the car was?
I think it's Oldsmobile, is it not?
No, it's not Oldsmobile. They used, again, let me give you the 1909, July 29th, 1909. Real quickly here, 521-8255, if you know this. General Motors bought this automobile company, basically one car. It was founded on the ruins of Henry Ford's second failed company. They used Oldsmobile engine. They used an Oldsmobile engine in this car, along with a new chassis that somebody designed. What was his name again? The machinist Henry Leland. Yes, a big name in automotive history. What was the automotive company that General Motors purchased on this day in 1909? The cost was $4.5 million for the entire company in 1909. That's a going rate for about 10 of them today. No, I exaggerate. Maybe to get 100. Who has the answer? Let's see if somebody quickly get the answer. Let's see if we can get Gary on the show. Just quickly here, I feel good about Gary. If we can get him on the show. Gary knows the answer to this. I know he does. I'm just waiting. There he is. There he is. He's popped up. Gary, what's the car we're looking for?
Well, I'm sure it's the Edsel.
It's not the Edsel. Gary, I had such hope for you. You're guessing the Edsel for 1909? It's a Cadillac, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Cadillac. Nobody's going to get it.